Hello. Right, so we're about to start the last session of the day before lunch. So just a bit of housekeeping. So Slido, the QR code's no longer working, but you can go to slido.com and put the code in. So we do have a panel coming up around, what's it called? The feasibility of building a new cold store facility, challenge and opportunities. So if you want to start putting some questions up on the board, I'll introduce the team shortly. Passports. This will be the last chance at lunchtime to get around all the booths and get your passports stamped. The passports have to be in before we come back at the end of lunch, so at 1:15. There is also a lot of other stall prizes that are up for grabs. If you go into the app, there's a prize tab that you can go in. You can look and see what every stall's got in terms of their prizes and see how you enter. So make sure you kind of get around to that. Right, so now we have a panel. So the panel is going to be talking about the feasibility of building a new cold storage facility, the challenges and the opportunities. And so on that panel, I will invite Brent Cawthray from General Manager of Manawatu Cold Store, Kevin Archer, Commercial Storage Vendor Lead at Fonterra, Mark Westphall, Structural Engineer at Connor Consulting, and Mark Stevens, Property Manager at Lineage. Come on up, guys. Have you got microphones? Oh, yeah.
Well, this could be a lot of fun. I've just been found out. I'm tasked with sort of comparing this. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Mark Stevens, who's going to talk about opportunities at the industry, and he stresses these are his personal views, not necessarily those of Lineage, which possibly goes for everybody. But Mark, over to you. Microphone beside. And feel free to put questions in, please, so we can keep the flow going.
Thank you for covering my legal responsibilities, Brent. And no chat GPT used in this. If you talk about the opportunities, I think, having been around for a long time, a lot of people in this room, up till 5 years ago, there had been a big period of nothing happening in the cold storage construction. And then going back over the last 3 to 5 years, there's probably about 100 to 150,000 pallets have come into the New Zealand market. That's not an exact number because I don't quite know how many Coolpack have got. And that's right through the country. So if you look in Auckland, Americold have done an expansion. You've got Ruakura, Big Chill and Maersk. Lineage have built in Tauriko at the back of Tauranga. We've also put an expansion recently on to Wakatu. Brent's put an expansion in Manawatu. Over your fence there's a spec build. And down south in Christchurch, Americold expanding. Coolpack have done a lot of work and Lineage are also looking at it. And all of that is new business. So the question is, what are the opportunities now for more business? Nobody's going to say any of those builds should not have been done, but how much more is there in the growth and what are the opportunities there? And from Lineage, there's different opportunities for a cold store. We've got 24 sites throughout the country. The oldest ones in Timaru are probably about 1950, still got cork falling off the wall, right through to Tauriko, which is sort of 2 years old, and a couple, 2 or 3 of those at the back end of freezing work. So there's some real challenges in the aged facilities. The opportunities are we want to build a new store to get out of the old stores that are costing a crap load of money to run and are only going to cost more, inefficient. And in places like Christchurch, we've got 7 facilities and we need to consolidate that down as you get out of them. So the opportunities are not only growth, it's building fit for purpose and facilities that will be right for the next sort of 20, 30 years. So completely different opportunities, but I think most of the conversations we're going to have here about the challenges of how we do it.
And there's certainly challenges. Kevin?
Yeah, from Fonterra point of view, we've similar sort of pathway over the last probably 15 years in regards to the builds I've been involved with. A number of them are around where we've had plant expansions and we've put a new plant up, or we've expanded the plant, and it's very clear that we need to put capacity in our network to support that. Also, we've worked through that ageing infrastructure conversation as well, and a couple of our boards have been very much around that infrastructure that had got to a stage that was end of life, or something as simple as frost heave developed, or they were sites that we wanted to exit because they potentially weren't in the right location, and we've done that with a number of our port-based facilities. So then the new builds that we've done in that space are very much, what do we need to support that manufacturing arm? What do we need to ensure that we get the best supply chain utilisation out of that space? And then how do we configure that new build to fit the business from that space? We're in the same vein. There's a couple of new builds underway with our team. One of them's very much around new product development and new product opportunities, but also around our ageing infrastructure on one of our other sites where, we then look at what the technologies are out there today and what we can take from that and then put in place on our manufacturing sites. So again, we'll be in that space around what are some of the challenges we struck, particularly around brownfield builds, and what are the sites where we've put some new technology in, making sure we're getting the absolute best value for our spend from our shareholders' funds.
Great, Kevin. Keep the questions rolling in. I'll get through the panel first, get Mark to say a few words, and we've certainly had a few issues in our site and fielding, and then we'll address the questions, okay, Mark?
Yeah, just to do with the theme of the concert, concert. I typed into ChatGPT this question and came up with a few answers and applied some green shoots, dark and maybe light green. So some of the challenges were probably right at the very start would be your finance. Obviously, like with the high cost of borrowing lately, I suppose that's put a hold on a lot of people about the cost to borrow. Then the other challenge is probably getting your sort of capex and getting a defined quantity on how much it's actually going to cost to build, which is what everyone needs to know really. And in this market, I suppose that has been hard to define. The next challenge is probably consenting. Like consenting has, like we do projects all over the country, and all the building consent authorities are sort of ask completely different questions, and they seem to have a sort of a pet sort of exposure to different things, and with the government coming in with the changes to the building consent, that could make things a lot easier. So that's a positive. The other thing would be right at the very start is finding your land. Land's obviously getting more expensive, and you want the location is prime, really, isn't it? So you need to be in your transport hubs and easy access to ports and motorways and stuff like that, and to service people. After land, what sort of land you do find? Prime land's probably gone, and the land that you do get might need a lot of geotechnical work. There might be a lot of remediation you need to do on that before you can even start the build. And then from there, then it's like whether you do a green build or an extension, brown extension onto your existing plant. So there's pluses and minuses and all of that. Then we can get into fire. I've heard a fair bit about fire today, but that's something you really got to nail early on in a project. Otherwise, you could be putting up firewalls on boundaries all over the place. So getting a good idea on what sort of fire system you're going to have is pretty important right at the start.
With our build in Fielding, which has been a few years in the process, we've only run into a couple of minor issues with the Resource Management Act and Horizons. Well, got some ladies here. Our ground was tested a few years ago, and they looked for mudfish. I didn't even know we had mudfish or what a mudfish was, and I still don't know, but found out we don't have any mudfish on site. and the site was fine for building. And then so we proceeded to do all the planning, and there's a development going around us, so the guy was putting in a new driveway. We have a shared driveway, asphalt. We said we'll pay the difference between asphalt and concrete. We'll do the concrete. So we've got the new drive in because we're accessing the new build from the right-hand side. Fantastic. So while that was all underway and we were committed to it, we found out, hello, the RMA changed, I believe, in 2020, and we now had wetlands out the back. So it flipped our whole design over. We now have a lovely concrete drive, which we won't be using. And the build, instead of being on the left, was on the right, which brought in firewall and everything like that. There's also, I found out from Horizons that it's a river running beside us. It's a little, Fielding's got a whole, it's a man-made drain running through Fielding. When it gets down to the industrial part of the town where we are, it's just lank, grey, industrial water with no flow. But apparently there's fish. And we wanted to pipe at our own expense, and Horizons told us we'd have to have 2 pipes, or 1 pipe on either side, a small pipe. Presumably for the fish, I don't know if you put an arrow on to go left and arrow on to go right. And just bloody ridiculous, dealing with bureaucracy, people putting roadblocks in your way. And that cost us about another, I think it's about 7 metres of land, because we would have drained it and then put concrete in that over the top. So pointless playing the blame game, but there's a lot of people out there that just seem to put roadblocks in the way. I mean, we're going to be employing another 40 or 45 people. We're only a small town, Fielding, bearing that in mind. And no, it's not big in terms of the numbers of the companies and that here, but it's big for us. But we've managed to get through all that. But by crikey, what an issue, and the stress involved for directors and our owner have just been immense. And I dare say speaking to the building company and everything, and that they have these issues all the time, whereas out in the back blocks, that ain't a wetlands, that just gets bulldozed and carry on, because it's just literally an open drain with pre-gas, which we fed with all our water from defrosting and everything over the years and that, so it's certainly had issues. There's some, Kim, did you guys...
Just to pick up on that, the work that you do around the geotechnical. So we've struck on a couple of our builds over the years, and many of the consultants in this room that we've worked with are well aware of it, where geotech has been very challenging, in particular where we wanted to put buildings we couldn't because of significant peat in the Waikato issues, and a couple of buildings that are actually constructed sitting on forests of trees because of the issues around peat, but it made really good sense to put the building there. There's some specific little odd ones around operating sites. I see the team here from Whareroa. One of our builds there, we had to actually cater for salt and sand coming in off the coast, and the factory is actually quite a long way in, but we still had to go with the highest rated metal that we could get because the site was exposed to it. We had to cater for seagulls getting on the roof and picking out sealant from panels, again because the site's very close to the water. So a number of those specific things with your work around the geotech and your specific site work, and also on your consenting, heights is obviously something that you've really got to be aware of. How do your local councils view it? What can you do if you're looking at going automation? How far up you are allowed to go before you run foul?
Oh yeah, and just another one would be noise as well. That's where you position your plant room on your site, so that with boundaries and stuff. Right. Yeah. And I suppose another challenge, which is also a sort of opportunity, would be how you can sort of modernise it, like ASRS or whatever sort of shuttles or anything like that you're going to be putting in, but trying to future-proof it so that you're doing it for today, but also you've got room for tomorrow, sort of thing, when more automation comes in. ELA's big enough to take extra.
Yeah, it's a good
So.
Cost.
Cost.
That's everything that we said. That's the challenge. It's cost.
Yep.
We all want shiny and new, best service, the best that you can do for the customers, but it's bloody expensive, particularly what's happened since COVID.
the issues we went through, Tauriko, through COVID and Cyclone Gabrielle, and the costs just went through the roof. Had to keep going back and asking for more money, it's got to be paid for some way. So I know I've got customers around, but nothing's free, and it's how you balance those challenges to get the best result for our business and the customers is really difficult, and we're going through a lot of that at the moment, and several of the things we've talked about, trying to get out of old facilities, consolidate. How do you do it and still make the business model work?
Things like the noise issue. You're building in an industrial area. It's not like you're building in the middle of bloody Remu area or anything, is it? I mean, you're out. We're in an industrial area. Noise is pretty well contained nowadays with technology and everything on that. But once again, it's another roadblock. People to justify their existence. Listen, there's some real cool questions coming in now. The America Cold site in Auckland is full. All new builds are outside of Auckland. Is this because Auckland is cost prohibitive to do a new build, RF aside? That'll be a Mark Stevens one.
Yes.
Succinct, to the point, outstanding. That probably is as simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
It's $1,200 a square metre.
What are thoughts on design build versus tendered work, Kevin?
So we've had the opportunity to be exposed to both of this. We've done quite a bit in the design build. The opportunity to get alongside really good consulting companies that you're confident with and you've got experience with, and then work with them to get alongside of a really good builder that you've got experience with that's going to stay with you for a long period of time, and you're trusting their expertise. So we've had a lot of success across our builds in the past across that design build, but also we know the tender process works. Tender process does consume a lot of your operational time and your people's time. So if you go down the tender process, you've got to be prepared to make that commitment to bring the experts out of your business and have them involved.
Thanks, Kev. Are there any specific areas that you believe designers should pay more attention to when designing new facilities? Personally, I think they need to get on board with the people who are working in the business. Like in our place, we've been, me and my two guys here, Eastie and Angus, closely aligned with the guys as to what we ask, but then constrained by space. And then we know that you need a really big ELA, and anybody in the industry knows you need to have a real big ELA. That's your movement with pedestrians and forklifts and everything like that.
Repeat that for Graham.
Yes. But I mean, and we at one stage, I think our ELA is 1150 and it was 850, and I said to my director, I said, listen, you don't bother building it because it's just a waste of time, we can't operate. So we could have gone bigger, but it's the builders did say, it mightn't look big now, but when you put the walls up and enclose it, it gets bigger, and I tell you what, it's true. So I go over there every day, but it's reached its maximum size. But yeah, definitely, I just think liaising, but the staff who are working there must be consulted on the workings of the buildings.
You guys are the end users, so yeah, it's vital. You know how it all works, and basically a building is just a shade over what you do basically. So it's just to keep the water out and keep the refrigeration going. So it's vital that to be successful, it's got to be a team of the client, the contractor, and the designer or the design build. That
Can really re-emphasise the size of the ELA. It's really got to facilitate the ability to turn New Zealand specific equipment around. So we've seen a couple of questions come up over the course of the conference. Remember, often what's being built in Australia or even in the likes of Europe and the state is not New Zealand specific, particularly our transport fleets. The mix and match of our transport fleets make it very difficult to live with a single design, so you've got to have that flexibility to use the right equipment that will allow your customers to be handled quickly and safely. The food safety side from Fonterra, that is, price is paramount. Food safety is the other key player that's paramount. We've got to be able to maintain that cold chain, and more focus will be on that, and you'll see that across all of the builds.
Next question, if your business was pallets in and pallets out, would you build in racking? We have a fair few pallet movements in and out. We put racking in once for a significant client. Oh, sorry. For a significant client for Fonterra to store their cheese. So he's ducking for cover. And we put that in at considerable expense for us, and then I think a year or 2 years later they stopped making that product. It was Edam cheese and everything on that. So then we managed to get frozen mozzarella, and then that stopped. And I appreciate that's business. That wasn't having a crack at Fonterra, although it was. So we thought we'd take one of the rows of racking out and adjust it so we could take meat in. And then you'd only have like half the room full of palletised meat and you are wasting. So we got a quote from the installers, who no longer have a presence at the conference, and I think it was 90,000 to put it in, bearing in mind this was back in the 90s, and it was 26,000 to take it down. Well, I got a couple of my boys in there and gave them a bonus, and they took it all down. We got rid of the scrap and tied it up, and we use stillages for meat. We can put cheese. Set pallets go into our small stillages, so we can still stack them four high. Next door, they've built an 8,000 pallet fully racked store, which is coming to line shortly, and that's pretty impressive. And they've got a curtain in there for haram and halal product. But of course, then they're finding out that they're constrained by the weight you can put the weight on the racks. So I think it's going to be 9 high. But there's a limit to the weight bearing. But you guys will understand that a lot more than me. So that's it from our perspective with the racking.
Is that question about building the racking and then wrapping the room around it, so the racking is the structure? And that might be one for you, Mark.
Yeah, you just certainly wouldn't do it retrospectively. Now, we got away with it probably back in the day because of the weight things. Everything's probably changed around that.
Yeah, well, one thing is with those ARS racking systems, that if you're going up really high, very hard to do it in an existing building because of the loads on the ground and the tolerances that they require for that stuff to operate. And then basically, as you get too high, you get over that 16.5 or whatever, then you can't sprinkle it. So then you've got to look at something else, hypox it, and then you do, with New Zealand being so seismic, if you start to get that high, you just get too much deflections and stuff between your building and your racking, and you get knocking and stuff. It just becomes uneconomical. So so the way forward is to basically tie the cladding onto the racking system and make it into one.
So if all new builds are moving outside of Auckland, doesn't this have a subsequent impact on customers' transport costs? Well, I suppose it just depends on where your customers are. I mean, we're very central in the Manawatu, so I don't think that would apply to us, but maybe it does for people outside of Auckland.
And I think if you look at the Golden Triangle, you had Ruakura, what's going on in Tauranga, there's different business parks down Rangiuru, there's other opportunities in, Northgate near Horotū. There's so much going on in that area, and there is so much transport going through and around that there will be hubs, there will be other railheads being built, that it's just got to move out of Auckland. So, we would love to have another facility near Wiri, which we've already got, but the reality is it's just not going to work on the land value, so you have to look at something else. And then, depending on the customers that you've got, how you do it, it's what is the transport benefits that you can get from that new facility. And rail has to be a better part of the future in some way. It is difficult, but it's got to be a better part of the future some way. So some of those other out of Auckland hubs come into play.
As you're obviously aware, we've got quite a few manufacturing sites that are stores aligned and DCs aligned with them that are out in the provinces, and we're not likely to build a new store or a new facility in Auckland going forward, but one would never know. So yeah, the port alignment's very important to Fonterra, the ability for us to get volume quickly and cost effectively out of a facility to a port on a ship and into market. So a key part of our financial calculations when we're looking at what we build and where we build it.
Where in the country is there surplus demand for new stores? You big boys, stay away from Manawatu. There's no room. Land's really expensive. Leave it to us little fellas. We're fine. We can handle everything there, but yeah, stay away. Stay in the big cities. Right, moving on to the next one. Where do you see the...
Hang on, Brent.
Sorry, Mark.
There's some lovely new land at Martin, apparently.
I'll be retired by then, mate, so it doesn't matter. Oh, that's... Oh, right.
Well, I guess there's plenty going on in Christchurch, but I think to Kevin's point, getting port alignment when your export is key. So, there's other opportunities in Dunedin, what do you do in Christchurch, and it'll be focused around port-centric where you can get it for the export business. The retail business is different. You've got to be closer to your markets, and Auckland is important for those businesses.
There's the question up there around, do we see value in refurbishment of existing stores versus demolition and rebuilding? We've had the experience across both where we've put a wrecking ball through an established facility and built new. That comes with a lot of challenges when we're rebuilding on a established site, and there's a lot of things, particularly with the older sites, where you're just not aware until you knock the building over and dig up the foundations, find out what's running underneath it, and particularly with some of those complex sites. So we've struck some challenges in there, but still come up with some really good builds. And we've managed to also get business cases across the line and rebuild existing facilities in Crawford Street in Hamilton, where we've put ASRS back in on existing sites, another great opportunity. And currently the team are running a new build at Whareroa, where we've again re-establishing a brand new facility on an established site, knocked over what was there and come out of the ground. But you get those challenges around existing facilities, making sure that they've been built well enough to allow you to get access to power, to water. Noise, as Mark alluded to, can be a challenge if you haven't got the ability to put plant rooms in the right places. And something as simple as trucks up and down a local road that people are using, and how many complaints you get around that. And there's a few challenges in that existing space builds.
So, Mark, what's the cost per square metre to build on average at the moment? Appreciating that there are a huge number of variables, including ground conditions. You should know this off the top, shouldn't you?
It's just completely variable, like on how high your building is, the location it is, absolutely everything. So that's a bit of an absolute guess. But the other question that had there,
It's just the bottom one. With land at a premium, everybody is going up. What's the maximum build height, or how high is too high?
Well, as we said before, like you go is at 16.5, or then you're outside of sprinklers, and you don't want in-rack sprinklers, so then you're going to have to go hypoxic or something similar, and then really that's also variable on where you are in the country. If you're in Wellington or something, or even Christchurch, a higher seismic zone. It would be more challenging than, say, doing it in Auckland or somewhere where the earthquake load is a lot lower.
How high do they go overseas?
Oh,
do you have any idea? Like
40,
way higher than
40,
us?
50 metres, I think. Yeah.
55 metres in Perth.
55?
To the top of the roof, outside.
Wow.
Yeah. But
Will we get into that direction, or we won't?
I don't think so, because land won't be that, land's not that expensive, and the cost to build those seismically, like obviously Australia doesn't have earthquakes, so or very little, so it just wouldn't be cost effective.
You'd want to spend a bit of time with a very good consulting company around your modelling of how you're going to manage a facility of that height, the speed of your equipment, the speed of your ASRS, the ability to take your volumes in and out. When you're putting product away at 30 odd metres in the air, no matter how good your cranes are, you start to spend a lot of money to get the best utilisation of that pallet space. So there are some other inputs to that modelling process you need to work through as well.
Just another one with like going brownfield versus sort of green is just the sort of having, Brent would know, but just having construction right next to your operating facility. So you're still trying to operate your business, and at the same time you've got something being added on, and you've got all the noise and the dust and all those sort of things to contend with, and extra trucks coming in with concrete and steel and everything like that. So that's also a challenge, really.
It could easily have been for us, but we're very lucky with our neighbours. We've got a great relationship, and he allowed us access through two sites. We created a couple of gates, told him we'd restore his land to how it was, which we will do, and enabled them to be doing all the steel work with all the cranes at one part of the site. If we didn't have the access from the other side, we wouldn't be anywhere near on time. So it's really important to get on with your neighbours. It's just so important. So
Sounds like a friendly place to build a new cold store, Brent.
oh, that's only our immediate neighbour. The rest of the bloody province are mongrels, apparently, the neighbours. But with Auckland, we've probably touched on this, with Auckland being too expensive, where do you see the biggest growth area for cold storage? Well, listen, there's just growth happening. I mean, the industry continues to grow, and we hear about declining stock numbers and everything like that, but the build's going into Dunedin, Christchurch, Auckland, where we're expanding. I mean, it's a marvellous industry to be in, but there must be a ceiling at some stage. But I mean, where is the growth?
If you looked at what's grown in the last 5 years, and you've seen it historically, there's a lot of growth, and then there'll be no investment, and then we seem to ride this wave. So the last 3 to 5 years, I don't know what's driven it, but there's been massive growth in the cold storage. Will that continue? Where's the demand? When you hear about the meat numbers and what's happening, is that it's not all about meat, but population supposedly growing. What does that do for the retail market? So I don't know, there's 150 odd thousand, plus there's potential new ones. Yeah, how long does that growth keep going? I don't.
And plus the staff of these things, because we've got a whole generation of people that don't want to work, but then we won't get into that. So, well, just a reality that we're all probably facing that. Some of my guys, I think, oh, they just rock on, and you think, oh, Jesus. They're never sick on Tuesday, Wednesdays or Thursdays. But how important is rail when considering a new build location? I mean, we're 20 minutes, so our containers get tracked. Obviously, if you've got a rail siding that's real big, and I know you guys are big on your carbon footprint and everything, Kevin.
Yeah, rail's a key part. If we can first and foremost utilise the rail network, we can move a lot of volume very quickly at cost-effective rates, and that's partnerships that we've got with the likes of Kiwi Rail. It's important. It's very important around your sustainability. It's also very important around your cold chain maintenance, getting the product to port as soon as practical. And for us, the other key player around rail currently is the ability to move big volume quickly from feeder sites and then unload those wagons and those specific designs really quickly as well. So it allows a fast turnover at our receiving sites and speeds up that product out of the train into the rooms and away and back in temperature.
Time's running out, but is the cost of materials likely to continue its exponential increase, or is it the opinion of the panel it's likely to level off? I think the Bondi boys and that, Nathan and that, would be saying the price will come down. Is that right, Nathan? Did I overhear you saying that? But who knows? But what does come down? I mean, nothing comes down anymore, does it? Everything goes up. So I think that's the answer. I mean, nothing comes down. It just... and wages don't reflect that. But, so what advice do you have when considering a consultant and contractor team to deliver a new build project? Mark?
What was that one?
The top one. The top one. What advice do you have when considering a consultant and contractor team to deliver a new build?
Well, I suppose the best thing is, obviously, you've got to be a team. You've got to get on with everyone, and it's the whole team. Like you need the sort of the geotech, the fire, the refrigeration, so the structural, the civils, they all got to work together. And obviously, like as I said before, you got to have your client input, which is vital, because you got to get what you want basically out of it. So you just got to have a good working relationship. Yeah.
We'll rip through a couple of these quickly before we sign off. How do you decide what level of automation to put into a new store? We're constrained by cost. We're in older premises, but anybody building new, I would suggest, would be looking at that, and it's the nature of our beast. We're not really into order picking or anything, so it doesn't suit us, but it's not a one-size-fits-all.
This is probably a bit more of a personal opinion than a corporate opinion. Automation should be, if you're building new, should be a default, and then you scale back from from the likes of an automation facility, potentially your hypoxic facility, decided scale in regards to whether you're going clad rack or not, and then off the back of that you decide what level of automation you need. When you're looking at investment across 30-year life cycle, potentially 40 years, then that automation equation stacks up quite quickly.
Peak size and logistics for any one site just depends on the site. The bigger the site, the more you can go, obviously. Shade roof, just quickly, for you, Mark, probably. Shade roof versus external clad, cool, cold storage design, the pros and cons, you've got 21 seconds.
Well, the benefit of a shade, well, there's pros and cons on both, really. The exposed roof, like with no cavity, no ceiling space, you need to really put a membrane on that. Otherwise you just get leaking roofs from that. But going with a shade roof, you also have problems with condensation, sort of thing. Plus, the shade roof will probably cost you 10% more because you've got basically two skins. Basically, you've got a roof and a ceiling, so you're still providing the ceiling, sort of thing. And obviously, working on removing that condensation is vitally important, sort of thing. So obviously, you need enough airflow.
Pros and cons with services inside the building.
Yeah, it depends if you want to put services in that ceiling space, then it's definitely better for.
And speed of buildability, once you build a shade roof, you can actually come out of the ground really fast.
Yeah.
So you've got to net that off with your overall spend.
Yeah, but if you've got a screed slab or something down already, then putting up the panel on the roofs, not much difference.
Okay, guys, fellow panellists, thank you very much, and thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, those of you who submitted questions and everything there. Hopefully it's been informative.
Thank you, sir.
Very insightful, that panel. I think it was really well done. A lot of insights coming through, and Auckland is definitely a struggle for a lot of us. And there will be some solutions that come out, I think, but who knows? Next up, we have. I'll put my Americold hat now on. So we're sponsoring the next speaker. Tony Alexander, for those who came to the Tauranga event, he spoke 2 years ago and he spoke at other events in the past as well. Really excited to bring him up on board, and before we do, I'd just like to play a short video.
When you're out to feed the world, you want a global cold chain partner who always raises the bar for you. A partner who designs end-to-end solutions to protect and streamline your business. The kind of solutions you can trust to fit the way you work and not the other way around. A partner who continuously improves how food moves and gives you the information you need to be confident. One you can rely on to keep your product safe every time because they treat your product like it's their own. A partner who can shape the future with innovation, like optimizing the cold chain and creating strategic alliances so you can always be a step ahead. For more than 120 years, one partner has passionately helped its customers be a part of the most meaningful moments when food unites us as families and friends. That partner is Americold, and we're committed to always do better for you.
Sorry, nice little plug. Right, so Tony's going to come up. There will be time for Q&A at the end, so please make sure you get your questions up on Slido. Tony will have time and we'll feed those back and forth. So, Tony Alexander.
Rightio. Look, thanks very much for that, Tim, and thanks to everybody for, being around for this session. This is late in your conference, isn't it? This is sort of the last session. You got something after this? Lunch. Okay. Oh, rightio. I'll try and keep it short and sweet. Yeah, like I say, thanks for having us in. I think I remember the talk a couple of years ago, so that would have been August 2023, and so August 2023, we had the ending of the binge pandemic. We went out and bought all those spas and kayaks and electric bikes and all this sort of thing, and that was unwinding, and the interest rates had been pushed up just under a year earlier aggressively from November 2022. The Reserve Bank 0.75% increase in the cash rate and said to us all, we're going to put you in recession as well. So there would have been a bit of grimness there, but I do recall that in that latter part of 2023, many of us were thinking, okay, interest rates are still going up. They went up about another 1%, the mortgage rates in that latter part of 2023, but maybe 2024 is going to be not too bad. It's not going to be great. There's still a lot of unwinding, and the main message I think I was giving at the time was that there's still going to be a lot of weeding out of businesses across all sectors in the country. So not just sort of obvious points of pressure like in residential construction, retailing and hospitality, but the binge would have led a lot of businesses to put off necessary restructuring, put off focusing on boosting productivity, etc., and not everybody would have enough cash flows to get them through the situation is sort of what I was trying to point out there. And so I always figured 2024 was going to be a year in which there'd be this weeding out and still businesses going under, but maybe it wasn't going to be quite so bad. And then when we got ourselves to, I guess it was the end of January of 2024, so the year's starting, and I've got these 5 surveys that I run each month, which give me coalface insight into what's happening with, especially on the property side, the real estate agents, mortgage brokers, but businesses generally, consumers as well, and things started to go a little bit wrong. The results started to come out a little bit on the weak side, and I thought, oh, there's something interesting going on there, and then the same thing happened in February, and I thought, maybe a man needs to change a little bit what he's saying here about 2024 weeding out but not too bad to, I think something not so good is coming along here. And I really started hammering that message from about March of 2024. But even myself, I guess, with the negative turn that I was taking for what was going on in the early part of last year, didn't anticipate that our economy would end up shrinking 1% in the June quarter of last year and another 1% in the September quarter of last year. Things really went drastically wrong in 2024. And what I'm going to do is, I guess, a version of the exercise I was running through in all my presentations from about March of 24 of this is why the economy seems to be surprising on the downside. If you haven't started rationalising your operations, addressing your cash flow issues, you'd better get aggressively stuck in because this doesn't look too flash. So I'm going to run through what I was talking about then, and a lot of the things I'm going to be talking about, not all of them, are a little bit relevant now as well because sort of the same thing has happened. We had this great optimism, remember, in the latter part of last year, I'm going to survive to 25, and now what we've had running through the economy again since around about March, February has been, well, I got through to 25, is this it? Is this as good as it gets? There's this wave of disappointment going through so many sectors of the economy, especially, I guess, in the city-based sectors there. You know, we can see that things are improving in the countryside, the farmers, etc., some good returns out there, but that takes a while to feed through into the cities, which, of course, is where the media is dominated. And so the main media messages people have been getting for some time now have definitely been on the negative side. So I'm going to run through also a list of sort of extra negative factors that have come along and given this sort of downward bias to the sentiment about where we are at the moment. And after I've done that, then I'll flip around to taking a bit of a stab on what 2026 is going to look like. And when I started to think about, maybe 2025 isn't going to be so flash there, I tried to come up with some snappy thing to describe, 26, survive to 25, but you won't get your fix to 26. So I sort of threw that out there a couple of times. I was never really happy with it. So I don't have anything fancy to say for next year. Let me just say, I guess my dominant message for the moment is there is a risk in many sectors of the economy at the moment that people are overestimating the weakness in our economy. I've been around doing this for about 4 decades or so, and what tends to happen is that when times are good, people think the good times are never going to end, and they overestimate, the length, the duration. And then when things are bad, people think she's all over, Red Rover, I'm getting out of here, my kids have already gone to Australia, I'm going to follow them as well, I'm going to bludge off them for a while when I get myself across to the GC or something like that. There's this real dominant element out there. And listening to Mike Hosking just the other day, because I don't listen to national radio any longer, they've sort of gone down the Googler just a little bit there, but he was talking about, for the first time I'd heard somebody say about turning the lights off again. I remember this was a big thing in the late 1990s. Well, the last one out, turn off the lights, because we saw this big emptying out of the country, and especially in the regions. The regions really got it hard in the late 80s, the 1990s, with the removal of those subsidies for the farmers from about 1984-85, the removal of tariff protection for a lot of the manufacturers. You saw all those factories closing down, Wanganui, it was happening there, the freezing works closing down, etc. So some of the rationalisation you might see in some of the industries at the moment, forestry, some rationalisation happening there, that was really happening, something wicked back in the 1980s and the early 1990s. And, people are sort of feeding on the dystopia at the moment. We're just sort of, everyone's saying, look, it's pretty bad out there. Oh, that's nothing. I just heard this and that and the other. And it's sort of spiralling. And so, one message I want to get across is that I think there is more valid hope for strength in 2026 than was necessarily the case, certainly for 24 and maybe for 2025 as well. So look, if you want to pose any questions along the way, you can stick your hand up and go for it, but I see you've got the Slido system set up there, so I'll leave plenty of time at the end there. And if you want to ask me about housing, I'll have another guess at what house prices are going to do, meaning none of us thought that house prices would have fallen for the past 5 months in a row. This is, there's something sort of new and interesting happening out there, so I can have a little bit of discussion about that and have a stab on interest rates and maybe where they're going to go as well, and hopefully make some comments about the labour market also. Again, in my experience, we tend to overestimate how many young people will disappear across to Australia. We tend to, like I say, just embrace the negative side and sort of miss out on the opportunities still back in this country. So let me start by having a look then at why was it last year it turned out to be a lot weaker than people were expecting. Now, a key thing to note here, and this is relevant now and going forward as well. Monetary policy, as I said, the Reserve Bank really kicked the tightening off in November of 2022, increased the cash rate by 0.75% and said at the time, we're going to put you into recession. For me, that is when the clock for monetary policy grinding in the economy really started ticking. And what's relevant there is it takes 18 to 24 months, year and a half to 2 years, for a big change in monetary policy and interest rates to actually feed through to your economy doing something substantial in response to that. And so 18 months down the track from November of 2022 gets yourself into May of 2024. That's when us economists expected we would see some decent negative pressure on the economy from the interest rates going up. But we saw this extra new sort of pressure and scaring of people coming along at exactly that time when on February 7th of 2024, the ANZ economists came out and said, well, the cash rate has been taken from the 0.25% level up to 5.5%. Yeah, there's some pain out there, but it's not enough. We think the Reserve Bank is going to have to take the cash rate up by another 0.5%. And that went down like an absolute bucket of cold sick, especially in the property sector. The real estate numbers I could see just bucketing off anew there. This whole fear that the Reserve Bank was going to have to apply even extra restraint on the economy when businesses were already seeing it in tightly compressed margins, cash flows being compromised, etc. out there. So that really kicked off 2024 in a new sort of sour mood for the business community, the household sector as well. And that got reinforced, in fact, 3 months later in May of last year when the Reserve Bank said it's still a toss of a coin what we do with interest rates from here. Yeah, maybe the next move is going to be a cut, but we could just as easily increase them again. And so again, that just reinforced that environment where one of the biggest sources of downward pressure was coming from the interest rates, the tight monetary policy, the fears that it was going to have to be made even worse by the Reserve Bank as it was fighting inflation. So that was sort of one of the extra pressures that was kicking on down there. Another one was coming from the IRD, the Inland Revenue Department there, just going out strongly from early last year, reminding businesses you had to pass through the PAYE and the GST you collected and start paying back the cheap money you got during the pandemic as well. And so that was something sort of extra negative coming along again for business cash flows, making people worry about, well, what are the numbers going to look like for the next 6-9 months if we are now having to come up with an extra $80,000 that somehow had slipped through the cracks there a while back. So that was a sort of a second thing that was coming along. A third thing was something uniquely hitting the older cohort of people, of consumers in New Zealand. People owning property, older people, by and large, had never before seen a combination of your insurance costs rising by about 26% on average for the year, at the same time as your local council was jacking your rates up by 10, 15, 20% or whatever, and saying right to your face, and we're going to do the same thing next year and the year after that as well, because we didn't invest enough in the past and the pipes are all rotten and this sort of thing. And so now you've got these huge extra bills coming along for property owners. I think it has relevance for the property investment sector out there. It has since then, and I think there's still elements of that running through at the moment. But that was something relatively new for the older cohort of people in our population, and leading to discussion about, well, for a lot of people, are they going to be able to stay in the house that they are in at the moment when their rates projected in Wellington to go from, say, $2,500 3 or 4 years ago, based on what the council was saying, to $11,000 5 years down the track. And what it means is that whatever spreadsheet a person has run at any point in their life up to then, trying to figure out, this is how much I need to save for my retirement, because this is what I will be spending in my retirement. And at the top of that list, you've got the big items there, like the rates, the insurance, etc. Every single calculation has been wrong. And so now you've got newly scared people wondering, well, can we do the renovations? Can we afford to update, the whiteware, the motor vehicle, etc.? And so some extra downward pressure on the retail spending and just, psychology generally out there. And what interested me, and sort of what actually got me to writing this list at that time, was a similar thing, more of a psychological hit, was coming along for the younger cohort of people in the country, was something that they also had not seen before. People who had maybe entered the workforce 5-10 years earlier, ever since the unemployment rate peaked at 6.7% in about 2012, people who had known nothing other than a strong labour market, lots of jobs out there. If you didn't like working there, if the coffee machine was no good there, or you didn't like the quality of the jokes or whatever, you just walked down the road and 3 days later you got another job for another $1 an hour or this sort of thing, and then working from home came along, so you do as much of that as possible. A whole generation of people has known nothing other than the labour market was on their side. And when the shit hit the fan with the pandemic, Reserve Bank is printing money, slashing interest rates, wage subsidy scheme from the government, everybody was there to help you as a young person. It was absolutely fantastic. Until the Reserve Bank tightened monetary policy and said we needed to throw you into recession, because the message there is no one is going to come along and help you, you're on your own basically. And psychologically I think that really hit a lot of young people hard, and I've got a bit of a measure, not so much for young people but people in general, about feelings of job security. And this comes from a survey I've been running for 5 years there of real estate agents, obviously focused on the housing market. But one of the questions I ask the agents there is, what is it that the buyers seem to be worried about? And they can tick a box for not enough listings, can't get access to finance, worried about interest rates, that sort of thing. And they can also tick the box for they're worried about their jobs. Now, on average, for the past 5 years, 26% of the agents have ticked the box saying buyers are worried about their jobs. At the start of 2024, that was only 14%. We started last year with people feeling really secure in their jobs. By June, that was 56% of agents saying people are worried about their incomes, about their employment. And so a key characteristic of the first half of last year was the loss of job confidence. And if you're worried about not being able to keep your employment, it's going to make you pull back on a lot of the spending that you are doing. So that's what I found interesting in the first half of last year. For the older people, the rates, the insurance are through the roof. And for the younger people, psychologically, are they going to lay me off? If they do, will I get another job? Don't know. And so that added to the sort of list there. Another one would be falling net migration In the year to October 2023, there was a net migration gain for our population of 135,000 people. So 135,000 people more came in than left. So there's a record nominal number for New Zealand. What is that, about 2.2% of the population or something like that? It was obviously a huge extra surge in economic activity that was produced in that period over to late 2023. Through 2024 and still through to now, those migration numbers falling away. I don't give that a big weighting for 2024, but it definitely needs to go in the mix there. Also to go into the mix there would be tightening of fiscal policy by the national government, elected in late 2023, and unfortunately having to do what previous national governments have had to do when they've come in after a period of Labour and address fiscal blowout, a deterioration in the Crown accounts. We saw Ruth Richardson had to do it in 1990, Bill English in 2008, and Nicola Willis from 2023 as well. So some tightening of fiscal policy out there. Now, this is mainly relevant for Wellington. We had about an extra 18,000 or so public servants hired during the 6 years of the Labor government there. I think we're up to maybe 6,000 of them have lost their jobs so far. Not all in Wellington, but it has definitely added to the real dour, sour sentiment that you'll find if you're brave enough to sort of wander around the streets of Wellington there. The place has got a definite sort of downbeat feel to it at the moment. Mainly in Wellington City. Not so much necessarily Porirua, Kapiti Coast, Lower Hutt, Upper Hutt, but definitely on the Wellington City side. So some tightening of fiscal policy from the government was also something relevant going through last year. And I'll just also mention, I've mentioned it once before, business margins being relatively tight because the prices, the cost of just about everything we do, the construction or whatever, have gone through the roof. 30, 40% or so, especially on the construction side, from where we were about 4 or so years ago. And this isn't just a New Zealand phenomena. You'll come across almost exactly the same numbers in Australia for an increase over that period of time, supply chain difficulties, all of it. All of these things come together, depressing the economy, everything's really looking bad, and then we get to July of last year. And what happened in July was that the Reserve Bank finally recognised the economy was weak. Took them a long, long time. And in July, they didn't actually ease monetary policy, but all they did was make a comment, looks like we're going to be cutting interest rates fairly soon. Now, that hit us all in the country so positively. It was like your partner who you ignore them and they ignore you, and then they suddenly say to you, you don't look bad in that suit, it's okay. And you go, holy cow. She's actually said something positive about me. Maybe she does like me after all and is not looking to shoot through at the first opportunity. And we just greeted this comment from the Reserve Bank so amazingly positively. Confidence went through the roof. And so the ANZ's, the monthly business outlook survey, the middle of the year, only a net 6% of businesses were saying, I think the economy's going to be better in 2025. Come October, it was a net 66%. My own monthly consumer spending plan survey in the middle of last year, I had a net 42% of people saying, I'm cutting spending on stuff in the next 3 to 6 months. In December, it was plus 10%. So the story for the second half of last year was basically one of, I'm going to survive to 25 because there is a boom coming along. And as soon as the Reserve Bank made that comment, and around about the time when they did make the first only 0.25% interest rate cut, that's all they started with in August 14 last year, there was a journalist who wrote an article and said, it looks like New Zealand is going to be a rock star economy again because interest rates are going down. And I thought, what a load of absolute bollocks. This was a comment made by an Australian economist back in about 2016, and it was wrong then, and I thought, this is definitely wrong. And I thought, I'm going to step forward and really try to scare people a bit here about the reasonable view you can have on how strong 2025 is going to be, because the risk when you're coming out of a recession is that you overestimate how positive things are going to be, and that overestimation is what sends you bankrupt, because all of a sudden you're out hiring people, signing up new commercial premises rents, ordering a new inventory in expectation of a boom, a great cash flow surge that's going to come along, and it doesn't come along, and then you get sent under. And so in the last 2 weeks of August last year, in my weekly publication there, I printed over a 2-week period this long list of reasons why the economy wouldn't boom. Not reasons why we stay in recession, but reasons why the degree of strength is going to be relatively contained. And I was quite pleased that when I got to the second half of this list in my publication, August 29, I think it was, in the afternoon after I'd sent it out on the Thursday, people started sending me emails saying, "Are you okay, Tony?" Because I'm generally a glass half full sort of person. And I was outright basically jumping up and down trying to scare people away from embracing a major positive scenario for next year, just giving a warning that there's still water to go under the bridge there. Just because monetary policy will no longer be tight doesn't mean our economy is going to boom. And I ran through a different version of the list from earlier on this year. So we get ourselves to this year, like I said earlier, around about February or March, and my surveys, which have been going back up again, started going back down. And some of the economic data in New Zealand started getting weak again. And people started saying to myself and surveys generally, well, like I say, I've survived to 25. Is this it? Is this as good as it gets? And so we've had the confidence measures moving off again. The ANZ's one is still about a positive 44%. So there's still this optimism for a year down the track, what the economy is going to be like. But at the moment, 2025 has definitely surprised on the weak side for businesses out there. And we saw the Reserve Bank just last week estimate, well, actually, we think the economy probably shrank 0.3% during the June quarter. And partly because of that, we're debating whether to cut interest rates 0.5%, and we're going to take them down 0.25% today and maybe another 0.5% by the end of this year. And so some of the extra things which have come along this year to make the economy weaker than we'd expected. So some of the things I've already mentioned, but one of them would be a reminder about the lagged impact of a change in monetary policy. It takes 18 to 24 months from a big change in monetary policy and the interest rates there, the comments from the central bank, to feed through to an impact on your economy. The Reserve Bank only started cutting interest rates in August of last year. And a lot of people, I think, were thinking, that means 2025 is going to be really strong. No, the real impact doesn't start cutting through until 18 months after that. What's that, late this year, early in 2026? That's when the impact of easing interest rates really starts to shine through, not this year. So that's the first thing to note, just I think some disappointment in people's minds, not sort of having enough of an allowance in there for the lag that's involved there. Early in the year, a lot of uncertainty with President Trump and what the heck is going to happen with the international trade environment, a tariff war sort of breaking out there if other countries were to retaliate against Trump as he was imposing tariffs, etc. Does the whole world spiral into a Great Depression scenario? I mean, thankfully what's happening so far is that people have recognised, well, this is the new mafia in the neighbourhood out there, and basically there is no upside into what do the Aussies call it, shirt fronting the guy there and trying to appear as big and strong as he is, because they seem to have the greater strength out there. And so it's a story of basically he insults the foreign leaders, they back down, the US has still implemented a new tariff regime there. Their average level of tariffs has gone from I think about 2% to 19% back to where it was in the 1930s, so pretty bad situation. But what matters is the absence of the retaliation. The Great Depression was partly caused by one country puts in place tariffs to protect its manufacturers to try and save jobs, and the other country would do the same thing. Boom, boom. And so the great risk from early this year was, okay, if the US does that, then Europe does this, Canada, Mexico, China, etc. And that hasn't happened. So most of us do not have a particularly negative outlook for the world economy. In fact, just a month ago, the International Monetary Fund upgraded slightly their forecast from where they set it in May for what the growth will be this year, about 3% and about 3.1% growth in the world economy for next year. So it's nothing particularly strong. There's no world boom or anything coming along, and there are downside risks. But clearly that was a new element of uncertainty that appeared from early this year. Other things coming along, the net migration now surprising on the low side. So the story of 2023 was the net migration flow of plus 135,000, basically 100,000 at least more than most of us were expecting when we had a bit of a stab at what the numbers would be, late 2022. End of 22, I thought maybe for 2023 we could have a net migration gain of 20, 25,000, not 135,000 as it turned out to be. Now we've got the migration numbers still falling away. A year ago the gain was still a net 80,000, now we're down to a net 14,000 over the past year. The average net migration gain for New Zealand for the past 10 years has been 50,000 per annum. So we're now into a below average net migration gain, net population gain environment. But that's only sort of one way in which the migration flows affect things, our spending in the country. It's also a matter of how do we talk about it. And most of you won't be aware of the likes of that. The net migration gain is only 14,000, but you will have paid close attention to the likes of the net loss across the ditch in calendar 2024 was 30,000 people generally, and the net loss of Kiwis all up to the rest of the world in the most recent year to about July is 46,000 or so. So we're definitely seeing a relatively strong outflow of Kiwi citizens going overseas. And one of the newer phenomena this time around is that it's not just the younger people going to try their hand across in London or obviously across in Australia, huge demand in so many sectors over there, but also their parents are tending to go as well. And my lifestyle block neighbours for myself there north of Wellington, their two sons shifted across to the Gold Coast, the GC there last year, the year before or so, and he was contracting into the government sector, so decided, right, no more work here. They just put their block on the market there and sold it within about 4 weeks, not because demand was strong. There's another two blocks up the road there with lovely houses on them. They're not selling. They're still hoping for 2021 prices to come back again. My neighbours met the market and they were gone within about 4 weeks or so. I've now got a doggy daycare centre next door. And initially when I saw them building the fences, the cages there, I thought, what the hell are they doing? Are they going to be breeding their own dogs? I hope not. Maybe they're going to bark during the day. Oh God, it's not going to be a kennel, like a cattery sort of thing there, because those poor dogs are definitely barking. No. The doggies, when they show up for doggy daycare, are really happy. And they're not barking. It's really relatively quiet. And it shows you people still have a lot of money out there to spend. I'm a cat person, so to me it's all just money down the gurgler. I think they're stupid, quite frankly. You paid education for your kids, the daycare and everything, get a bit older or whatever, and now you're paying it for the doggies as well. Anyway, they're happy animals, so that's what's happening in the property next door for your guide. It's one of the new sectors which is growing strongly out there. Anyway, we tend to focus on the fact every single one of us knows somebody who's gone to Australia or somebody whose kids have gone to Australia, and so we spiral on that one. Anything bad that's going on, you think, oh Christ, maybe I should go as well. My kids are probably going to go. I've got 5 kids, 2 of them are already across in Perth. 2 others will stay in New Zealand. 1 other, when he's old enough, he's going to shoot through and probably go across there as well. But psychologically, when we see those sort of numbers, we tend to, like I say, feed on them in a bit of a downward spiral dystopia scenario. What else have we got there? I mentioned earlier on, house prices have fallen for each of the past 5 months. They're down about 2.5% on average nationwide from where they were at the peak back in about a limited peak back in about February or so. And falling house prices are generally not associated with the economy's doing well, profits are being made, people have got jobs, and so we tend to focus on that one as well. And I would suggest that most recently that's really what the Reserve Bank has been focusing on, that sort of thing and other negative factors as well. And so last week when they did their monetary policy review there and announced the change in the cash rate, we got the news that out of the 6 people voting on the Monetary Policy Committee, 2 of them actually voted for cutting the cash rate by 0.5%, not just the 0.25%, which was the majority vote out there. And when we look at what's coming out from the Reserve Bank, that's where we look these days. The votes, not just the decision, how did they vote on it? I personally don't have a view on the individuals involved. We don't know who voted for what, but that's where we tend to look. And this is where predicting monetary policy and interest rates is a complete dog's breakfast. You see, you could have a view on the economy which is completely right, doesn't count for anything, because you've got to look at the Reserve Bank's view on the economy. The Reserve Bank might have a view on the economy which is completely right, still doesn't matter. Comes down to the interpretation of the 6 people on the Monetary Policy Committee on how are they personally seeing the economy, how are they weighing up the risks of global environment a bit uncertain versus the upturn in the farming sector, trying to balance these things off. There's no certainty about it at all. And maybe that's why in last week's monetary policy statement for the Reserve Bank, it's a 59-page document. There's only 4.3 pages of discussion of the actual economic outlook. The entire rest of it is basically talking about what's already happened in the economy. And I had a look at that, and of that 4 and a little bit pages of economic outlook, 1 page is actual words about what they think is going to happen, and the other 3 and a bit pages are the various assumptions they've made about what is going to happen out there. So when you talk about economic forecasting, not really. It's economic assuming is sort of what we're doing out there. I mention that because you cannot base your business plan or your interest rate risk management strategy on any particular scenario of interest rates proving accurate. Whatever forecast you've got in your hands now for where the interest rates are going to go are highly likely to be wrong. It's a question of how wrong will they be, and for economists like myself, it's not a question of, well, they're going to be wrong. They're going to be wrong. The question is, will I have enough sense to recognise early enough when I'm going to be wrong and be able to change them without changing them too soon and go all over the place, or be a stick in the mud and not change them quickly enough? Forecasting is quite a dog's breakfast out there. But where we sit at the moment is, I think the Reserve Bank has decided, right, we're going to allow for the risk that maybe the economy is fundamentally weaker than we think, and so we're going to give some extra stimulus to the interest rates coming through. And this is sort of a bit of a reverse of what we saw in late 2022 with the extra hike in interest rates. Now we have sort of some extra potential change in the sentiment of the economy coming through. People are thinking maybe the interest rates go a lot lower. Personally, I don't think they are. I think where we sit now is just about it, quite frankly, for the swap rates, the 1, 3, 5-year fixed mortgage rates, etc. But now what we have is an opposite factor in effect. When we look at to where the economy is likely to go, general demand for food products, consumer products generally over 2026, what we have now is a lagged impact yet to come through from interest rates going down. So what I'm trying to do here now is pull you away from wallowing in the dystopia and thinking she's all over Red Rover. There is an upturn in the economy coming along, and frankly, we learned something interesting yesterday. Everybody had made an estimate that during the June quarter, retail spending, the volume of spending of consumers in New Zealand, fell by about 0.3%. The Reserve Bank based its forecast of the economy shrinking on weak retail spending. We actually learnt spending rose by 0.5% in the June quarter. Just sort of at the last point in the cycle there, the Reserve Bank has gone to the weak side with its outlook, and as timing would have it, now the risks are starting to shift just the other way out there. But it's not just the monetary policy lag running through which is going to give greater consumer spending over 2026. There's also the traditional lag of a lift in farm incomes. When you see the farm incomes rising strongly, nothing happens in the cities at all. You don't hear about it. The farmers know that when times are good, just shut up. Don't be saying it out on the news there. You don't want people thinking it's an easy game, or, if there's a drought, we shouldn't hand over any money, this sort of thing there. But it can take a while to feed through. And as it feeds through, it starts first of all in Invercargill. And very quickly, sort of around about the same time, you'll see it in Dunedin as well, strong rural economies. Christchurch, we'll see it with the strong rural hinterland as well. You'll see elements coming through definitely in your Palmerston North, your Bay of Plenty, Taranaki, New Plymouth as well. After a year, maybe 15 months, Auckland will feel some positivity about it, so that lagged effect is yet to come through. Wellington may notice something 18 to 24 months down the track of an upturn in rural incomes. But there are 2 important lags running through the economy that will go towards improved economic activity over 2026, 2027. The lagged impact of monetary policy being eased and the lagged impact of a good rise in rural incomes. With an extra bonus we've just learnt with Fonterra, they made the announcement a year ago, but they sealed the deal just recently, selling off their branded consumer goods business there, and the return of capital to the dairy farmers, their shareholders, is going to, I think, about be about $3.2 billion or so. It's about 0.8% or so of GDP, economic activity in New Zealand. So that's going to be some extra, which initially will be responsibly devoted to getting down debt, and then pretty quickly, like that afternoon, is going to go towards new tractors and new facilities and all those sorts of things. I think it is legitimate to talk about an increase in the construction activity undertaken generally on the farms, catching up on all the delayed maintenance there, and this feeds through. Like I say, there's a geographical spread. And when you look at some of the economic data coming out recently, you've got some positivity, like I say, showing through in Southland, Otago there, and it will feed through to the rest of the country. And then there's a few other things to note as well. Businesses do have a belief that next year is going to be better. And on average, in the ANZ's monthly business survey, you would have a net 7% only of businesses saying, I'm going to invest machinery, plant and equipment in the coming year. That's running at 20% most recently. So businesses are saying we're willing to back the better conditions next year with some investment in new machinery, etc. now. And on top of that, we've got a lot of investment going on in digitisation and, of course, outright experimentation with AI as well. I bet for yourselves there's some sort of experimentation going on. There's potentially some good productivity gains to be made out there. So that is one reason I feel, like I say, so confident about next year being stronger than what we've seen for quite some time, because there is business investment being undertaken. And we have infrastructure activity. The government has a lot of infrastructure to be caught up on over the next century, quite frankly, and so there's a lot of work to be done. How much work is anyone's guess? This is the difficulty when we come to talking about a big project like this. I mean, a big cool store facility is bad enough. You're talking about a new highway or bridges or this sort of thing. Just because it gets approved that, it's going to go ahead, doesn't mean the funding for Melling Bridge has necessarily been approved to go ahead. But then the funding does get approved, and so you can start thinking, okay, right, we're going to get a definite bridge there. But when exactly is it going to start? And just because something starts and there's X thousand orange road cones go out there, doesn't mean State Highway 58 doesn't then sit with nothing happening for about 2 years, while other ducks need to be brought in a row by Downer and these sort of places out there. So us economists, much as all of us are saying infrastructure is going to be a supporting factor for the economy going forward, none of us really has the foggiest of, okay, but how does 26 extra activity compare with extra activity in 27, 28? But it's definitely out there on the positive side. There's scope for export education to lift, so this is relevant for Auckland City in terms of this is probably as bad as it gets there, and I think there's good upside to come along with lots more foreign students studying in the country. And also residential construction. I'm going to be honest here, I am struggling to really get a firm grip on how strong will house building be from late this year and next year. I think there's going to be improvement, but we still have a lot of developers looking to sell off excess stock out there. The consent numbers being issued for new dwellings, all sorts to be issued. They peaked at 51,000, a record high about 3 years ago. We're at 34,000 now, and we've been that for pretty much the last 12 months. So when I look at that, it says to me, it's sort of bottomed out, I think, the house building, and now led by standalone houses, we get some increased activity going on, going forward. But I'm a bit uncertain about actually how many of the consents are in fact being acted on out there, how much extra is to wash through the system, especially given the fact that when people actually finally get the cost for what's it's going to cost to put the house up, they may go back to looking at the listings for something which already exists out there. Certainly I think a lot of young people are doing that at the moment. You put it all together and it says to me that it is reasonable for yourselves to be expecting that there will be an increase in the rate of growth in economic activity from late this year, a summer sort of a thing, and especially through 26 into 27. And of course that brings implications. And one of the implications is that the labour market will tighten up again. We've seen the unemployment rate go from 3.3%, unsustainably low, caused by the excessive policy stimulus of the pandemic, but gone from 4% pre-pandemic, 3.3% low. We're now at 5.2%. Maybe it goes a little bit higher, but not quite much at all, quite frankly. I see a risk that the labour force could tighten up relatively quickly next year, quicker than people are willing to think at the moment, as we're all just still sort of thinking about this negatively. And it's going to be a combination of still a reasonable outflow of people to Australia, because there's a lot of stuff to be built over there. The roads, there's 11,000 kilometres of high voltage power lines to go in, because there's all the solar farms, etc. going in, and so the power has to be taken to other parts of the country. They've got missile factories to build, maybe a submarine base to build out there, etc. There's a lot of stuff to be built in Australia, so that's going to make things relatively tight. There's engineers, builders going to be required for the government's infrastructure projects, and like I say, I do see house construction picking up again as well. And so when you're looking at your facilities that you're looking at getting built, I think there is going to be new pressure on resources coming along, maybe especially from the second half of next year. So keep an eye on the staff that you've got there. Watch out if you're on the construction side there, not to be taking anybody for granted, because this period of sort of an easing in the labour force, it is only ever cyclical, it's only a temporary thing. And remember that we've still got a lot of people going through and doing their arts degrees and BComs, and not necessarily doing the engineering and the trading trades out there as well. So that's first thing to note. Secondly, just watch out for optimistic assumptions you might make on interest rates, because I've seen this before. When the interest rates go down, people think, we've hit the long run. We've hit the long run where interest rates are going to be low and steady, no worries going forward. No, there will be worries going forward. The Reserve Bank has just surprised on the dovish side, surprised with, more easy than the market was thinking. Well, the next thing, at some stage, maybe it's late 26, more especially 27, they will surprise on the other side. They sound a bit more worried than we were thinking, and your interest rates will get a bit of a boost out there. Personally, that's why when I'm looking at mortgages out there, I can easily understand people fixing 1 year, 18 months, 2 years. I don't have a big problem. I would fix 3 years, personally, because I do see some risks on the interest rates out to maybe 18 months or so. Nothing major, but part of what I'm thinking about comes from one of the special factors in play at the moment and last year, just making things so horrible in the business sector generally in New Zealand, and that is really tight margins. Your costs have gone up, but ability to increase selling prices in order to recoup the costs, gone down the gurgler. And that's what monetary policy is about. And so I'm just going to run a little sort of exercise through with you at the moment that I started doing, I think about 15 or so months ago. And so you wouldn't have seen this particular thing before. But if you think about tightening of monetary policy, think of it as 4 boxes. Box number 1 is interest rates go up. And in box number 4, inflation goes down. Everybody knows that. So there's no surprise. Everybody knows box 1 and box 4. Box number 2 is consumer spending getting crunched. Some people know that if you increase interest rates, it leads to you and I not buying so many things. Their consumer spending is crunched, and that's what gets inflation down. Not directly, no. Monetary policy is all about box 3 here. Interest rates go up, consumer spending gets crunched there, and in box number 3, a business has its 3, 6, 9, 12 monthly meeting there to look at the pricing of their products. And they go, well, look, our costs have still gone up 8% over the past year. What are we going to do? Well, let's do what we did last year, the year before, and the year before that. Let's just increase our prices by another 8%. It worked before, no worries. What the Reserve Bank is looking for is that after that's been discussed around the table and everybody's about to vote, yeah, we'll increase our prices 8%, someone steps forward, marketing manager, could be the storeman, anybody like that, and says, well, actually, we just approved extra $50,000 to rent some more space for the goods we're not selling here. We've already got our customers going on Temu and these other sort of things, shopping offshore. If we increase our prices 8%, we're going to slaughter our brand reputation, we're going to slaughter our customer base there. We cannot do it. We are going to have to take margin compression, and we are going to have to look to try and offset that by cutting costs. We're going to have to lay off some people. Some of the expansion plans we had, we've got to delay them now for the next five years. Maybe you've got 100 products there. You've got to rank all your products by profitability, take out the loss-making ones, the loss leaders there, slim yourselves down to maybe 77 products or something like that. A version we see with Smith City Market right at the moment. You might have 30 premises around the country. You got to slim yourselves down to the most profitable, and you kick out the 5, the 7, the 9 at the bottom. Might be coming up for repairs, lease renewals, or something like that, where your returns are least. You've got to go through rankings of maybe your customers as well. So your high yielding customers you get a lot of profit from, and then there's ones where they're just a pain in the backside basically, where you need someone in your staff who's silly enough to go along to them and say, well, you know, Joe, you've been our customer there for 20 years, but we're presenting you with an opportunity to take your business somewhere else. Psychologically, really hard to do, especially given our culture in New Zealand. So this is what box 3 is what monetary policy is all about. It's not about hitting the consumers, it's about hitting businesses. It's about hitting yourselves, realising that even if your costs have gone up, you can't get away with a price increase any longer. Unless you're an electricity company, local authority, insurance company, a bank. New Zealand is filled with oligopolies. Sectors with only 3 or 4 or 5, suppliers of goods and services. So it's a bit of a problem there. The building materials manufacturing, obviously in there as well. That's what monetary policy is about. And we can see box 3 operating when we look again at the ANZ's monthly business outlook survey. And their survey looks out about 12 months. Hang on, first of all, let me talk about an alternative survey. The New Zealand Institute of Economic Research does this survey. They've been running it since 1960s. It goes out 3 months. And one of the questions they ask businesses is, are you planning to increase your prices in the next 3 months? Now, since inflation got low in New Zealand in 1992, on average in the NZIR survey, every quarter when they do it, on average a net 21% of businesses would say, I'm putting my prices up in the next 3 months. The most recent reading is minus 2%. Businesses saying, not put my prices up in the next 3 months at all. That is monetary policy success, easy justification for interest rates going down. They also ask the businesses, do you expect your costs to go up in the next 3 months? On average, a net 29% of businesses would say, since 1992, yeah, my costs are going up in the next 3 months. Latest reading, 42%. Well above average proportion of yourselves expect your costs are going to go up, and yet you can't get your price increases through. So there's a massive margin squeeze on across most sectors in the economy. Cash flows are compromised. Liquidators are being appointed out there. That's what monetary policy is about. It's about munting your cash flows, essentially, after the consumers have pulled back on their spending out there. But where I get my little inflation concern from is this, and this is the ANZ survey. Their one goes out 12 months. And since 1992, they're asking businesses, do you plan increasing your prices in 12 months' time? On average, a net 26% of businesses have said, I'm increasing my prices in the coming year. That was 82% 3 years ago, when inflation was just 7% plus or whatever. Got down 35, up, we're still sitting at about 44%. An above average proportion of businesses are basically saying, when the customers return, as I think they will next year, I'm putting my prices up because my margins are munted and I've got to get it back again. And that's why, you see, if I were running monetary policy at the moment, I probably wouldn't have cut the interest rates last week at all, because I don't think the economy is as munted as people have been thinking at the moment. It's weak, but it's not completely stuffed. And I see economic conditions improving next year, and I'm worried that there is still inflation in the system. And I'm worried that much as some of the wage measures are relatively muted at the moment, I think the labour market could tighten up relatively quickly over next year as well. So that's just like I say, when you're looking at your interest rate risk management, be careful you don't fall into the trap which appears at this point in the interest rate and economic cycle of, I'm just rolling 90 days. I'm keeping my core debt rolling 90 days. The bank will give me a reasonable facility for that going forward. No. At some point you will get bitten by that. It's simply a question of, does that biting start in 18 months' time, or is it 36 months' time or so when the interest rates start going back up again? And I think what the Reserve Bank has made a decision is they faced a choice there of, we don't cut interest rates much more at all, they're flattish, and then when they go up, they don't have to go up all that much, versus, oh, what the hell, everybody's pretty dour on themselves at the moment, let's do some extra cutting, and the bit they haven't said, and we'll have to increase them relatively quickly again somewhere down the track. Don't know where, but somewhere down the track. So just be aware of that when you're looking at your interest rate risk management procedures out there. So, like I say, the past 2 years have been surprisingly weak. I've spent most of the time in my talking and my writings explaining why you're seeing this negativity around yourselves, why the margins have been so tight. And having been in this business for 3-4 decades or so, I know that psychologically at this point, towards the end of a weak period, that's when people continue to overestimate the weakness, and maybe now is when you make some mistakes. Like I say, just avoiding locking in any debt 3 or 5 years fixed or something like that. Not advice, but just be aware of where the interest rate risks are going to lie out there. Be aware the labour market will tighten up again, so watch what assumptions you're making about the availability of labour to be running all your trucks and this sort of thing. How many people are going through getting the HT licences or whatever the heck classifications are required out there. These things will tighten up again. And from yourselves in the cold storage business there, obviously with the good returns coming through in the farming sector, I would expect there will be a new building up of some of the production out there. Much as we've seen a decline in sheep numbers, etc., the incentive is out there actually for some rebuilding of some of the herds, etc. Not everybody is going to be converting to Pinus radiata farms, forest out there, for instance. So I'll knock it on the head there and just open the whole thing up for questions and comments. And the Slido, has stuff appeared to the side? Okay, rightio. I'll let you take care of that, Tim.
If you want to, I'll stand here so
Yes.
I can see them and you grab
Oh,
that.
okay, rightio.
Because I can't see from there. Right, so what impact do you see with Labor talking about capital gain tax or wealth tax if elected?
Yeah, see, this is
Oh, turn it off.
Rightio, with that? Yeah, rightio. Yeah, for me, this is the disappointing thing about New Zealand, that there is no economic growth debate, and there hasn't been for some time. There's no real debate about economic reforms. There's a view that's been there for a few decades of, well, Roger Douglas took care of that, and Ruth Richardson and Bill Birch sort of finished it off there in the 1990s, and she'll be right. And we're going to do wonderful things like process our milk into all these value-added products. I remember Dryden Spring would be standing up there saying, look at this tie that I've got on, it's made out of milk. You can make milk into 1,500 things out there. We're going to move up the value-added chain. We're going to be the new Nestle. Yeah, nah, we're not good enough at that. We're really good at growing grass and managing the cows, but when it comes to branded consumer businesses, yeah, nah. And that actually was the inspiration to me last year in August, writing the negative comments that I did there. I thought, oh, shit, a brick. After all these reforms and all this period, we're not going to be the new Nestle. We're not going to have a whole range of consumer branded products coming out for New Zealand, which tend to have the higher margins out there. And so sort of reinforcing my unhappiness about what Fonterra have done. I can understand why they've done it, but I take that as a bit of a bad sign. The fact that the economic growth debate isn't about economic growth going forward, it's about what taxes do we put up in order to do some more spending. Using as justification, maybe there's an intergenerational wealth transfer thing we want to get have a go at here. I know, let's blame the baby boomers, and so how do we get more money out of them, for instance? It's a strong theme that still comes through much of the media, for instance, out there. A wealth tax, a capital gains tax. Yes, a capital gains tax is something missing from New Zealand. Is it being discussed in the context of, and we're going to cut income tax rates at the same time? No. We've had a history in New Zealand, like many other governments around the world, of overspending and taking advantage of weak periods in the economy to do even more spending, as Labor unfortunately did over that 6-year period. So in Australia, the Reserve Bank has just noted that their estimate of the sustainable rate of growth in Australia's economy based on productivity growth, they've cut it from 2.3% down to 2% because they're simply not getting the productivity growth that is desired. In New Zealand, our level of productivity, so not productivity growth, 0.5%, 1.1 or whatever, our level of productivity has fallen 3 years in a row in the year to June of 2024. So look, if Australia have got a sustainable economic growth rate, non-inflationary, down to 2%, really, frankly, I think we're probably lower than that. And to turn it around, actually, I think would be exceedingly difficult to do because it would, I think, take a change in the culture for ourselves in New Zealand. We can invest in roads, a more efficient rail network, motorways or bridges, whatever the heck it's going to be. But inherently, when you've got people that you know from school think you're a prick because you've made a little bit of money and you're running a business and you hire 50 people, it's not exactly the American version of people will put up with any sort of crap. You're a billionaire, say what you want, tell me what to do. We don't have that culture. So ultimately, if you'd ask me the sort of, well, how do we really get New Zealand's economy humming? Probably have to replace most of the people in it with a lot more immigrants. a lot more keen, lean, hungry Indians, Sri Lankans, Chinese, Taiwanese, or whatever the hell out there, because there's a bit of a cultural thing. Sorry, I got off on a little bit of a tangent there, but I knew I'd get my Fonterra comment in there somewhere. I looked at their Wikipedia page, and I never actually knew that Fonterra, the name, comes from fond de terre. It was either Portuguese or Spanish, springs from the ground. I thought, oh, that makes sense. Now I know why they called it Fonterra. But there we go.
Okay, thanks, Tony. Have you had any financial policy discussion with Chloe Swarbrick?
Oh, no. With the Greens, you know what you're going to get, a Marxist party, which is grabbing onto whatever cloak they can find to wrap themselves in and say, oh, we're green, and that's why you need to be told what to do with your lives, what to think, what to feel, where to invest your money, hand over all our taxes. Previously it was, oh, we've got to attack acid rain, so that'd be a useful issue to go and regulate people. You know exactly where the Greens are coming from. You know what you're going to get. Control of your lives, Leninist, Stalinist policies, basically. So there's no point talking with them. You'd just be banging your head against a brick wall. So, yeah.
Okay, so listening to you, Hickey is right about the economy. Is Bishop or Luxon right on housing?
Bishop or Luxon right on housing in terms of what would they be right about?
One wants the prices to go up, one wants the prices to go down.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah. People don't generally associate falling house prices with successful economy, and we tend to downwardly spiral. And oh my God, my house is losing value. I've been working. I've got a salary of $70,000, and half of it just went because my house price went down over the past year. And so I'd be on the side of. It is natural that house prices will rise in line with changes in construction costs, changes in the availability of land, and general increase in wages going forward as well. And a comment I've made for a long time has been that whereas since 1992, low inflation era starting, on average house prices in New Zealand have gone up 7.2 times, increased on average 6.3% a year, my expectation would be going forward, the average increase each year is going to be somewhere around about 5% or so. Some things have fundamentally changed for the housing market out there, and I was going to mention this when I said about the number of consents at 34,000. I've worked out since 1970, you can look at the ratio of the number of consents issued. In 1974 it was 40,000 versus the population, work out their ratio. So back then, in about 1974, 40,000, 3 million, whatever it was, about 1.5 or something like that. And when we had the peak at 51,000 3 years ago, there was about 1% of the population. On average, since 1970, the ratio of consents issued to the population has been 0.65%. We've had a year, it's steadied out at about 34,000 versus 5.3 million. It works out at about 0.62% or something like that. After all the pain and misery, after the high interest rates, that's the bottom of the cycle. There has been a structural change in the average level of house construction in New Zealand. And this is partly the outcome you get from the lessons of Christchurch earthquake. Free up the land, and you tend to control the section prices, land being available. And also the Auckland's Unitary Plan from 2016, make intensification possible. You get a lot of extra townhouses, etc. coming forward, and extra moves being made by the government going forward. So in terms of what should be, I don't necessarily have a great view on the house prices, but my view is that they will start rising again. But we're into one of the last stages of the clearing out of the excess at the moment. The article, based on possibly analysis from Cotality, Core Logic, noting that there are large purchases of existing multi-generational investors of blocks of townhouses. I've been waiting for this one for a year and a half. The developers have got excess townhouses, and now they're just selling off 10 at a go, that sort of thing. And so people are getting some bargains. One of the other things is, yes, there's new blood coming into the housing investment sector, but you've got a lot of the older investors who've had a property for a number of years, whose rates are through the roof, whose insurance is through the roof, maintenance costs are through the roof. They are selling to realise the value of their property, to get money to fund a retirement, which is more expensive than they were expecting. I can see that in my surveys, but you can't actually see that in anything else out there. So it is, yes, there are new investors coming forward, but the investors driving the market, no, that's not what's going to happen going forward now. And since early 2023, it's actually been the first home buyers taking advantage of prices falling and good listings, which are still out there at the moment. So there's just some comments anyway.
Okay, next one is the government doing enough through fiscal policy to support the manufacturing and primary sectors?
Enough through fiscal policy to support the manufacturing sector, there's no point. It'd just be money down the toilet, basically. Manufacturing in New Zealand is a proportion of total economic activity. The GFC really slaughtered it. It's been a straight line down ever since then. And I don't see reason to expect it is going to turn around. What have we got? Timber mill out back of Nelson closing down. Was it the pulp and paper as well? I would expect to see more of that. When you're looking at overseas countries with far greater economies of scale, are pretty much going to be able to undercut most, production facilities in New Zealand unless transport costs are through the roof. We're a long way down. And so I would personally think if the government was to come up with some sort of manufacturing support policies there, outside of some low tax rates or that sort of thing, it actually wouldn't make all that much difference here. New Zealand will be, going forward, what it always was in the past. I hope you didn't misinterpret what I was saying about Fonterra and dairy farming. New Zealand always has been a big farm. Our entire future going forward is we will continue to be a big farm. And so the policies of the government, if I were there having some advice to give, it wouldn't really be focusing on the manufacturing side. It would actually be on the farming side. What do the farmers need? How can we assist them? Not subsidies or anything like that, the old SMPs, but how can we get a better flow of young people coming through into the farming sector? That sort of thing. Because young people are open to ideas. I don't know if you've cottoned on, but there's a level of entrepreneurship out there which never existed in previous days. A lot of young people getting involved in startups. Maybe this is going to be the next big thing, that sort of thing. My eldest daughter, Lilia, she set up and sold off Wellington Live, like a Wellington Neighbourly thing there, a media company. She did it from a bedroom from age 17. I didn't even know it was going on. She doesn't talk too much, all that much. But anyway, she did that. My youngest son, Edmund, he's heavily involved in these startup things. They've got a new thing at Victoria University, Rinter, R-I-N-T-R, where they're looking to try and match the landlords with the tenants, stand in the middle there. There's a few different things like that out there for different sectors. So, people are open to ideas, and if somehow I'd be working on how do we get the startup people regime going there with the farming sector? That is where I would be devoting my efforts, not so much the manufacturing, I'm sorry.
Okay. The next one is, are you not worried about the impact of energy supply on the economy long term?
Yes, I am worried about the impact of energy supply. When we had a bit in the paper this morning noting the strong increase, quintupling of energy prices from 2021. I can't remember, I think it was in the context of the timber mill production costs going up. And I think this aversion to gas has just been very negative for the New Zealand economy, as it has in Australia as well. And I think to myself, can't we bring back the Ministry of Works and get another Clyde Dam or something in there? I mean, we can plant some other trees and move some snails. Just get better people running the fridge. The snails they moved on the Denniston Plateau, West Coast, for Bathurst mining there. Doc took them all out, held the project up for ages, and they put them in a fridge. I think someone from Doc, turned the fridge off of a weekend and they died. Anyway, just for your guide, I keep an eye on what's happening down there. I can't remember what the question was.
It was about it was about energy supply on the...
Energy supply, yes, I am concerned. We need more generating facility going forward. But no worries, we're now going to have a stockpile of, 1 million tonnes of coal. Oh, and no, that doesn't seem like a successful energy policy necessarily.
Next one's around the Northern Roadway and the impacts for North Auckland economy.
Yes, for Auckland, 120k south, Hamilton, that expressway network that's been developed, it's like this is a necessary condition to have good economic growth, productivity growth, standard of living growth, and ability for people and businesses to move around, move their goods around. It doesn't necessarily give you the strong growth, but without it, you're definitely not going to achieve it. So I think that's very positive. And also, I have to put in going north from Auckland as well. I have minimal familiarity with north of Auckland, but the extension of the motorway, etc. there is extremely positive. For Christchurch, it's your southern motorway and also the northern corridor going out. For Wellington, of course, I was listening about the comments from Manawatu area just before there. I live near State Highway 58, about bottom of my road is about a K away from the intersection with Transmission Gully there. You get on that beautiful thing there, it's absolutely absolutely beautiful, this motorway, 27 kilometres of thing, and then you continue on, the expressway's going north, and the funding's been approved for O2NL, Otaki to north of Levin, and I was looking out the window as we were, eventually circling around for 3/4 of an hour up there this morning, and I could see where the road stopped being the expressway, just beyond Otaki, and I'm thinking, yeah, but that's going to go to Levin, and then maybe one day it goes to Palmerston North. The economic development for the North Island is going to be that Golden Triangle area there with the little head up the top there to Whangarei, and north of Wellington. Not Wellington City. I've been dour on Wellington City and the vomit and the stabbings and falling in the harbour for quite some time there. But in your partly Porirua, a bit more your Kapiti Coast, the Upper Hutt, I've got a strong feeling about Upper Hutt, but certainly up your Horowhenua and all through there. Very positive, and I learnt about the new distribution facilities set up up there, Palmerston North there some time ago, so very positive about all of that.
Right. We've got 30 seconds, so we'll do one more. Which one do you want to do on the board? There's crypto, there's OCR, and there's adopted AI.
Have I adopted AI? When ChatGPT appeared October 2023, was it? Yeah, 2023. I looked at that, put some stuff in there, and I thought, nah, bollocks on that. I've read enough science fiction over the years to know what's going to happen here. Obviously Skynet. No, you need a point of difference. And my whole thing about an economist from many, many years ago was no point being like everybody else, you need a point of difference. And so from after 2 weeks of that thing being launched there, I put at the bottom of all my publications, no AI has been used in the production of this publication. So people can go, that's what he's thinking. That mistake there, well, that's him, isn't it? That load of bollocks, that's him. It's not some machine. And just be careful if you do use AI. Some people, I swear, used it earlier this year to try and summarise my business survey, and it had 3 key points out of the whole thing. Every single thing was wrong. Outright, 100% wrong. The numbers they used, the interpretation they had there. So be careful with AI. And just for your guide, you read Wall Street Journal and this sort of thing, there's a feeling that AI for the moment has plateaued, that we don't have PhD level of the latest one that was announced 2 weeks, OpenAI I think it was. It's going wrong, and I saw the map it made of America, and it had to populate with the names of the states. Not a single one of the names was right out there, so that's why I choose on the AI. Yeah, there we go. Time's up.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for having me in. Cheers.
Awesome. Thank you, mate. Right, thank you for that, Tony. That was an impressive speech, and it's great to hear from an economist who makes everything sound a lot more exciting than what it really is. So, no, well done, and yeah, I'm sure we'll get you back again. Now it is time to break for lunch. Lunch is till 1:15. So get out, see the booths, have some food, get your passports back in. The prize draws are all after the break. We'll get back here for 1:15, and then we're finishing up after that. Okay? Awesome. Thanks, guys.